The Uruk period is characterized by the formation of the first city-states in Mesopotamia. During the preceding Ubed period, villages were established in southern Mesopotamia, and these grew into towns. This urbanization continued with Uruk leading the way. The urbanization of this ancient city is evident in the creation of monumental architecture. For instance, the legendary King Gilgamesh is traditionally credited with building the walls that surrounded and protected Uruk. It is also considered the first true city in the world and the origin of writing, the first example of architectural work in stone, and the building of great stone structures, the origin of the ziggurat, and the first city to develop the cylinder seal, which the ancient Mesopotamians used to designate personal property or as a signature on documents. Considering the importance the cylinder seal had for the people of the time, and that it stood for one's personal identity and reputation, the city could also be credited as the one which first recognized the importance of the individual in the collective community. The city was continuously inhabited from its founding until 300 CE, when, owing to both natural and man-made influences, people began to desert the area. It lay abandoned and buried until excavated in 1853 CE by William Loftus for the British Museum. In the heart of the city of Uruk are two large temple complexes, the Anu Sanctuary, belonging originally to Kulaba, and the Eanna Sanctuary, dedicated to Ishtar, known by scholars as the Mosaic Temple of Uruk, which rises to a height of 16 meters on a square base measuring 60 by 60 meters. Both complexes have revealed several successive temple structures of the Uruk period, including the White Temple in the Anu Sanctuary and the limestone and pillar temples in the Eanna Sanctuary. A characteristic form of decoration involves the use of clay cones with painted tops pressed into the mud plaster facing the buildings, a technique known as clay cone mosaic. On the northwest side of the Eanna Sanctuary is a ziggurat, an ancient Mesopotamian temple tower consisting of a lofty pyramidal structure built in successive stages with outside staircases and a shrine at the top, where the priests ruled from, laid out by Ur-Nemu of Ur in the Ur-3rd period, late 3rd millennium BCE. Next, we have the major Sumerian city-state of Ur, which was located in Mesopotamia, marked today by Tel Amuqayr in southern Iraq. It was founded circa 3800 BCE and was recorded in written history from the 26th century BCE. Its patron god was Nana, the moon god, and the city's name literally means the abode of Nana. Cuneiform tablets show that Ur was, during the 3rd millennium BCE, a highly centralized, wealthy, bureaucratic state. The discovery of the royal tombs, dating from about the 25th century BCE, showed that the area had luxury items made out of precious metals and semi-precious stones, which would have required importation. Some estimate that Ur was the largest city in the world from 2030 to 1980 BCE, with approximately 65,000 people living there. Shown to the right, the ziggurat of Ur was built in the 21st century BCE during the reign of Ur-Nemu and was reconstructed in the 6th century BCE by Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon. The ruins, which cover an area of 3,900 feet by 2,600 feet, were uncovered in the 1930s. It was part of a temple complex that served as an administrative center for the city of Ur and was dedicated to Nana, the moon god. The earliest writing we know of dates back to around 3000 BCE and was probably invented by the Sumerians, living in major cities with centralized economies in what is now southern Iraq. The earliest tablets with written inscriptions represent the work of administrators, perhaps of large temple institutions, recording the allocation of rations or the movement and storage of goods. Temple officials needed to keep records of the grain, sheep, and cattle entering or leaving their stores and farms, and it became impossible to rely on memory. So an alternative method was required, and the very earliest texts were pictures of the items scribes needed to record, known as pictographs. Writing, the recording of a spoken language, emerged from earlier recording systems at the end of the 4th millennium. The first written language in Mesopotamia is called Sumerian. Most of the early tablets came from the site of Uruk in southern Mesopotamia, and it may have been here that this form of writing was invented. These texts were drawn on damp clay tablets using a pointed tool called a stylus. It seems the scribes realized it was quicker and easier to produce representations of such things as animals rather than naturalistic impressions of them. They began to draw marks in the clay to make up signs, which were standardized so they could be recognized by many people. From these beginnings, cuneiform signs were put together and developed to represent sounds so they could be used to record spoken language. Once this was achieved, ideas and concepts could be expressed and communicated in writing. Cuneiform is one of the oldest forms of writing known. It means wedge-shaped because people wrote it using a reed stylus cut to make a wedge-shaped mark on a clay tablet. Letters enclosed in clay envelopes, as well as works of literature such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, have been found. Historical accounts have also come to light, as have huge libraries such as that belonging to the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. Cuneiform writing was used to record a variety of information, such as temple activities, business and trade. Cuneiform was also used to write stories, myths, and personal letters. The latest known example of cuneiform is an astronomical text from CE 75. During its 3,000-year history, cuneiform was used to write around 15 different languages, including Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Elamite, Hittite, Eritrean, and Old Persian. With the development of the wheel and sail, transportation of goods became easier. Heavy bulk goods could travel by ox cart or be loaded onto river boats. Most long-distance trade, however, was carried out by caravans using donkeys as pack animals. Donkeys could carry around 150 pounds and travel on the plains and into the mountains, places where wheeled carts couldn't go. Craftsmen in Mesopotamia created a variety of trade goods, from fine textiles to sturdy, nearly mass-produced pottery made in temple workshops to leather goods, jewelry, basketry, devotional figurines, and ivory carvings, among others. Agricultural products such as grains and cooking oils were also exported, as well as dates and flax. Mesopotamian cities established trade all up and down the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and into Anatolia, today's Turkey. Other overland trade routes went east over the Zagros Mountains into present-day Iran and Afghanistan. A busy sea route went through the Persian Gulf, across the Arabian Sea to the Indus Valley in what is today's northern India and Pakistan. By the 3rd millennium, Mesopotamia trade went in all directions. Because of irrigation, southern Mesopotamia was rich in agricultural products, including a variety of fruits and vegetables, nuts, dairy, fish, and meat from animals both wild and domestic. Other than food items, Mesopotamia was rich in mud, clay, and reeds, out of which they built their cities. For most other essential goods, such as metal ores and timber, Mesopotamia needed trade. Besides local trade, which brought food and animals into the city and took tools, plows, and harnesses out to the countryside, long-distance trade was needed for resources like copper and tin, and for luxury items for the nobility. Merchants and traders in early Mesopotamian cities began to form caravans for long-distance trading. As Mesopotamian trade developed, merchants even set up trade emporiums in other regions and cities. Around 1700 BCE, Assyrian traders set up a trading outpost in Kanesh, Anatolia. The traders traveled over 1,000 miles to this city in today's Turkey. There, the Assyrian merchants paid a tax to the city's ruler to live in their own quarter of Kanesh and trade with the city dwellers and other merchants who came from afar to trade for their Mesopotamian goods. The Assyrian traders came with a caravan of donkeys loaded with fine textiles their womenfolk wove, and tin that originally came from farther east. They traded the textiles and tin for silver and other goods. The Assyrian merchants were part of a family business that traded all over Mesopotamia and beyond. An archaeological excavation of 2,000 clay tablets in present-day Kultepe, Turkey, brought these detailed merchants' records to light. By the time of the Assyrian Empire, Mesopotamia was exporting grains, cooking oil, pottery, leather goods, baskets, textiles, and jewelry, and importing Egyptian gold, Indian ivory and pearls, Anatolian silver, Arabian copper, and Persian tin. Trade was always vital to the resource-poor Mesopotamia. Mesopotamian religion was polytheistic, with followers worshipping several main gods and thousands of minor gods. The three main gods were Ea, the god of wisdom and magic, Anu, the sky god, and Enlil, the god of earth, storms, and agriculture, and the controller of fates. Ea is the creator and protector of humanity in both the Epic of Gilgamesh and the story of the Great Flood. In the latter story, Ea made humans out of clay, but the god Enlil sought to destroy humanity by creating a flood. Ea had the humans build an ark, and mankind was spared. If this story sounds familiar, it should. Foundational Mesopotamian religious stories about the Garden of Eden, the Great Flood, and the creation of the Tower of Babel found their way into the Bible, and the Mesopotamian religion influenced both Christianity and Islam. Each Mesopotamian city had its own patron god or goddess, and most of what we know of them has been passed down through clay tablets describing Mesopotamian religious beliefs and practices. Ancient Mesopotamian views on the afterlife must be pieced together from a variety of sources across different genres. Many literary texts, most famously the Epic of Gilgamesh, contemplate the meaning of death, recount the fate of the dead in the netherworld, and describe mourning rites. Further sources for Mesopotamian afterlife beliefs include burials, grave inscriptions, economic texts, recording disbursements for funerals or cults of the dead, references to death in royal inscriptions and edicts, chronicles, royal and private letters, lexical texts, cultic commentaries, magico-medical texts, omens, and curse formulas. Beliefs and practices relating to the afterlife also varied with socioeconomic status and differed within official and popular religious paradigms. With this in mind, however, cultural continuity between the Sumerian civilization and its successors allows a synthesis of diverse sources in order to provide a working introduction to Mesopotamian concepts of the afterlife. Ancient Mesopotamians conceptualized the netherworld as the cosmic opposite of the heavens and as a shadowy version of life on earth. Metaphysically, it was thought to lie a great distance from the realm of the living. Physically, however, it lay underground, and it poetically is described as located only a short distance from the earth's surface. Literary accounts of the netherworld are generally dismal. It is described as a dark land of no return, and the house which none leaves who enters, with dust on its door and bolt. Sumerians used funerary iconography of Ishtar to seek to avoid the unpleasant aspects of the netherworld, from which Ishtar herself had escaped. The Mesopotamian netherworld is therefore best understood as neither a place of great misery nor great joy, but as a dulled version of the life on earth. The only food or drink was dry dust, but family members of the deceased would pour libations for them to drink. Unlike many other afterlives of the ancient world, in the Sumerian underworld, there was no final judgment of the deceased, and the dead were neither punished nor rewarded for their deeds in life. A person's quality of existence in the underworld was determined by their conditions of burial. The ruler of the underworld was the goddess Ereshkigal, who lived in the palace Ganzir, sometimes used as a name for the underworld itself. The underworld was also the abode of various demons, including the hideous child devourer Lamashtu, the fearsome wind demon and protector god Pazuzu, and Gala, who dragged mortals to the underworld. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the earliest known work of literature in the world. It is an account of the mythical adventures of a Sumerian king named Gilgamesh, and handles issues such as the loss of loved ones due to death. It was written in cuneiform on 12 stone tablets. So now I'm going to read to you from a storyboard that was created by another teacher that does a good job of just summarizing the overall plot of the Epic of Gilgamesh. 4,000 years ago, Gilgamesh was the ruler of the Sumerian city-state Uruk. He was said to be 1/3 human and 2/3 god and possessed superhuman strength. As king, he had enormous walls built around Uruk to keep out intruders. However, inside the walls, Gilgamesh was an oppressive and cruel ruler. The people of Uruk prayed to the god Anu to punish Gilgamesh for his crimes against them. To answer their cries, Anu sent to them the wild man Enkidu to wreak havoc in Gilgamesh's city as punishment. Enkidu challenged Gilgamesh and the two fought fiercely. They battled throughout an entire day, and as the moon rose, Enkidu realized he would not be able to defeat the mighty Gilgamesh. Enkidu conceded, but Gilgamesh was impressed with Enkidu's strength, so the two ended the day as friends. Gilgamesh and Enkidu sought adventure, so they traveled to the cedar forest to slay the demon Humbaba, who lived there, and to cut down the valuable cedar trees. When they arrived, Enkidu and Gilgamesh began to cut down the cedar trees, but the demon Humbaba saw them and attacked. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fought bravely and managed to kill Humbaba. Triumphant, they cut down the tallest tree in the forest and carved a mighty gate for the walls of Uruk. Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned to Uruk victorious. Upon their return, Enkidu fell ill, having been cursed by the demon Humbaba. In his weakened state, Enkidu had the dreams of the underworld and the place after death, and told Gilgamesh that it was dark and a dusty place filled with sorrow. After 12 long days of suffering, Enkidu died. Gilgamesh was so upset that he instructed the entire kingdom to mourn for Enkidu. Faced with the prospect of his own mortality, Gilgamesh vowed to find the secret to eternal life. Determined not to meet the same fate as Enkidu, Gilgamesh sought the Ancient One, Utnapishtim, who was granted immortality by the gods. Gilgamesh ventured for days and finally reached the waters of death. After forcing Gilgamesh to cut down 300 trees and make 1,000 oars, the boatman, Urshanabi, agreed to take Gilgamesh across the waters of death to see Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh he will grant him eternal life if he could stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh agreed, but after the long, arduous journey, he quickly fell asleep. Utnapishtim gave Gilgamesh one more chance. He told him of a special flower growing at the bottom of the sea that would grant him immortality. Gilgamesh swam to the bottom of the sea and found the flower. When he was on land, he lay on the flower down while he rested and bathed. A snake slithered down from the dunes and ate the flower. Gilgamesh was crushed and returned to Uruk defeated. As Gilgamesh appreciated the massive, finely crafted walls of Uruk, he realized that while he may not live forever, his accomplishments and creations will. Instead, live to tell the tale of his greatness. Through his struggle to find meaning in life, Gilgamesh defied death, and in doing so becomes the first epic hero in world literature. The grief of Gilgamesh and the questions his friend's death evoke resonate with every human being who has wrestled with the meaning of life in the face of death. Although Gilgamesh ultimately fails to win immortality in the story, his deeds live on through the written word, and so does he. Since the Epic of Gilgamesh existed in oral form long before it was written down, there has been much debate over whether the extant tale is more early Sumerian or later Babylonian in cultural influence. The best preserved version of the story comes from Shin Leki Unini, who most likely embellished on the original Sumerian source material. Historical evidence for Gilgamesh's existence is found in inscriptions crediting him with the building of the Great Walls of Uruk, modern-day Warqa, Iraq, which in the story are the tablets upon which he first records his great deeds and his quest for the meaning of life. There are other references to him by known historical figures of his time, such as King Imr Baragesi of Kish, and of course the Sumerian king List, and the legends which grew up around his reign. Whether the historical king existed is no longer relevant, however, as the character has taken on a life of his own over the centuries. The story of Gilgamesh's failure to realize his dreams of immortality is the very means by which he attains it. The epic itself is immortality and has served as the model for any similar tale which has been written since. It was no doubt widely read prior to the fall of the Assyrian Empire in 612 BCE, and has become increasingly popular and influential since its rediscovery in 1879. Gilgamesh encourages hope in that even though one may not be able to live forever, the choices one makes in life resonate in the lives of others. These others may be friends, family, acquaintances, or maybe strangers living long after one's death who continue to be touched by the eternal story of the hero's refusal to accept a life without meaning. Gilgamesh's struggle against apparent meaninglessness defines him, just as it defines anyone who has ever lived, and his quest continues to inspire those who recognize how eternal and intrinsically human that struggle is.